Good evening, I'm Rick Lord.
And I'm Kelly Hart. This is Eyewitness News. New at 6 tonight, the trial for former Massey Energy CEO Don Blankenship starting today. Here is what we can tell you tonight. Jury selection for the trial of embattled coal boss Don Blankenship began in Charleston. 300 potential jurors will be brought in from as far north as Wood County, and they will be brought in throughout today, tomorrow, and Monday. Blankenship faces a 3-count indictment that accuses him of conspiring to violate mine safety laws and lying to Massey investors. Family and friends of 29 miners killed in the Upper Big Branch mine explosion still feeling the effects of the disaster more than 5 years later. Eyewitness News reporter Bob Aaron was in Whitesville today talking with people who live there about Blankenship going on trial. He was in Whitesville today, but we begin our team coverage with Eyewitness News reporter Leslie Rubin. She was there as Blankenship arrived at the federal courthouse this morning, spoke to family members of those UBB victims.
Let's send it out to her live at the federal courthouse right now. Leslie, what's going on?
Rick, it is a day that many family members say they thought they would never see. The highest ranking, most powerful Massey official to be charged yet. The former king of coal himself, Don Blankenship, on trial facing decades in prison. No doubt it has been a long and painful 5 years for the families of those fallen miners. Today they tell me that they have hope that the end to bring Don Blankenship to justice is near. Flanked by Homeland Security and a $6 million legal team, Don Blankenship arrives at the federal courthouse in Charleston in a minivan. Mr. Blankenship, you want to talk about how you're feeling today? Any comment? You feeling positive? It's good?
I always feel good.
Inside, the first 100 of 300 jurors that could decide his guilt or innocence in a 3-count indictment are questioned by the court. More than 40 jurors had been dismissed by late Thursday afternoon as Blankenship continues to maintain he's done nothing wrong. Are you still claiming your innocence right now?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Family members of the fallen miners watched from the front row of an overflow courtroom across the hall as jurors were questioned.
I want him to have to look at us.
Betty Hara lost her younger brother Steve in the blast.
If nothing else, I have to stand up for him. You know, I've got to represent him.
At the end of the day, she wants Blankenship to go to prison for his alleged hand in the worst coal mining disaster in 40 years.
People like that don't ever think they can be brought to justice. We started wondering. 5 years we waited for this.
Blankenship is not on trial for the deaths of the 29 miners. He's also not accused of directly causing the explosion, but he is accused of knowing that hundreds of safety violations were happening at UBB, and he was the one that had the power to stop it.
The people that can tell the truth's dead. And the people on earth that can tell the truth is not going to tell it because they're a part of it.
100 jurors were brought in today, 100 more will be brought in tomorrow, and then 100 more on Monday. We will continue to follow this trial until the very end. But for now, reporting live in Charleston, Leslie Rubin, Eyewitness News.
At 6 tonight, the jury in the Don Blankenship case off for Columbus Day today, but there are still weeks of testimony before them. Eyewitness News reporter Leslie Rubin here now to bring us up to speed on what we've learned so far and what it means for the former CEO facing prison time. Leslie?
Callie, the jury has heard 3 days of testimony so far, but went home Friday after hearing Don Blankenship's own voice for the first time. Recorded phone conversations now at the center of this trial. Calls the government is using to try and prove their case that Blankenship had a hand in even minor details of the company and put coal production and even his own personal wealth ahead of safety at his mines. Today, we got some perspective from a former U.S. attorney who has been in the courtroom watching one of the biggest trials in the state's history unfold.
That's one reason I don't have as much money as I should have, because I'm always too conservative.
According to phone calls Don Blankenship secretly recorded in his office, he didn't believe his $12 million salary as Massey CEO was enough.
Although $12 million is a lot of money. It's not a lot of money compared to 5 or 6 billion.
Blankenship there referring to Massey's corporate value of $6 billion. In that call, he wasn't pleased that his board wanted to cap his salary at $12 million and called them, quote, so unappreciative.
They're important because they're the defendant's own words. So Don Blankenship, the jury is hearing his voice and that's going to have a big impact on this trial and maybe something that causes him to need to testify.
Mike Hissom is a former U.S. attorney and worked on the UBB investigation before Blankenship's indictment. He, like many, also wonders why Blankenship found it necessary to record certain conversations and realizes how critical these 18 recordings are in the government's case to convict Blankenship. Charges that he conspired to break mine safety laws at UBB in order to produce more coal and make more money, and that he lied to investors about Massey's safety practices after the April 2010 explosion that killed 29 miners.
People are focused on the fact that CEOs don't get charged in cases like that. Most CEOs don't have hundreds of hours of tape recordings of their telephone calls showing their involvement in particular events in the corporation.
They talk about all my pay being in stock and all of it being on options and none of it being cash. Finally I said, I can't go to the grocery store and buy groceries with options.
One of the big things is that the defense has a 6-foot poster board that they put up in the trial that's the corporate structure of Massey. And they're trying to show that Don Blankenship was at the top of that structure and he didn't reach down into the bottom of the structure. What the recordings show is his personal involvement at very minor levels of the Upper Big Branch mine.
It's not clear who the defense plans to call or if Blankenship will testify on his own behalf. But if the jury hears from Blankenship in any other way than his secret recordings, Hissom expects his testimony to be concise.
He would explain where he stood in the organization and how high level his focus was, and that it was just simply not his intent for anybody to commit health and safety violations, to break the law.
The trial resumes tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.
Jurors in the Don Blankenship case now wrapping up 7 full days of testimony as the latest witness meant to help the government show jurors how top mine officials say they were pressured into producing coal at mines that lacked enough staff. Eyewitness News reporter Leslie Rubin in the studio or in the newsroom now to bring us up to date on what we've learned so far. Leslie?
Jurors going home for the weekend with testimony from former Massey Mine President David Hugert fresh in their minds. Hugert in town from a halfway house where he's finishing off the remainder of his 3.5-year prison sentence in connection with the federal investigation into the UBB disaster. The prosecution still trying to paint a picture of a man, a CEO, Don Blankenship, more concerned with his personal wealth and coal production over safety at his mines. The defense, though, working to paint a picture of a concerned CEO who cared about safety within his coal mines. David Hugert comes off the witness stand after hours of testimony over the course of the last 2 days, not willing to publicly say what he believes should happen to his former boss, Don Blankenship. Do you think Don Blankenship should be held accountable for what he's on trial for?
I don't want to comment, ma'am.
Hugert was president of Massey's Green Valley unit for more than a decade. He implicated Blankenship in a 2013 hearing where he pleaded guilty to conspiring an illegal scheme to warn miners about safety inspections. That deal heavily scrutinized by the defense during Hugert's testimony, Blankenship's lawyers making sure the jury knew the deal allowed him to not be prosecuted for a long list of other charges, including buying prescription pills, lying to the feds, and scheming Massey out of tens of thousands of dollars. Do you think your testimony went well?
I think so, and that's all I'll say.
How are things going for you? Are you still in the halfway house?
Yes.
Do you think that you should have been convicted of what you were and done time for it?
Yes, I broke the law, yes.
Hugert told the jury he was pressured into producing coal by higher-ups, including Blankenship. He said he was criticized for production, but never for lack of safety compliance. He ended his testimony by saying shortcuts were sometimes taken in that push for production. The defense, though, continues to show exhibits of memos and emails that they say will prove Blankenship cared about safety and was committed to making improvements. But for family members of the 29 men who died at UBB, they say it's clear to them that safety was never a priority.
Even though the defense is trying so very hard to put forward that safety was important to them, it doesn't matter how many emails that you send regarding that. What matters is what happens inside the organization, inside the mines where these people are having to work. Did safety really become a first issue for them. And the truth is it was never first with them.
Day 8 of testimony will start on Monday morning, but in the meantime, you can stay up to date on everything that's happened thus far with the trial at a special section on our website, WCHSTV.com. For now, reporting in Charleston, Leslie Rubin, Eyewitness News.
Continuing coverage now of the Don Blankenship trial. Today's testimony highlighted by the revelation that Massey laid off 17 workers at UBB just 10 days before the explosion.
The prosecution is starting to bring in top Massey officials to testify against the former CEO. Eyewitness News reporter Leslie Rubin live at the federal courthouse in Charleston with the latest from today's testimony. Leslie?
Yeah, Kelly, like you said, we are starting to hear from some of those top Massey officials today, the highest ranking in the Massey food chain thus far that we've heard from.
Continuing coverage now of the trial of Don Blankenship. Tearful testimony in court today.
A former Massey insider who says he warned Blankenship and other officials about what he felt were serious safety violations back on the stand today. Eyewitness News reporter Leslie Rubin live out front of the federal courthouse with a look inside day 19 of the Blankenship trial. Leslie?
UBB family members sit in the front row of the courtroom every single day, and sometimes they become emotional at certain testimony. Today was one of those days as they sat wiping back tears, listening to Bill Ross lay out different recommendations that he made to Massey officials just less than a year before the UBB mine exploded, killing 29 miners. Bill Ross comes into the federal courthouse Wednesday for day 2 of his testimony in the Don Blankenship trial. Prosecutors called Ross a whistleblower in opening statements nearly a month ago, as they promised the jury they would hear from the former MSHA ventilation specialist who went to work for Massey. His testimony continuing to center on this, a memo sent in June 2009 from Massey lawyer Stephanie Ojeda to Blankenship and other Massey officials. 8 pages of notes from a meeting with Ross where he laid out his concerns over serious safety problems he saw at Massey. The memo was labeled confidential, attorney-client privileged, but Ross said he hoped his safety recommendations would have been shared with everyone at Massey. Blankenship apparently thought differently.
It's highly confidential because I don't know really what to do with it, because I meant to keep it privileged and confidential, but Bill, his interview on our performance regarding MSHA safety is worse than a Charleston Gazette article.
In July, Ross made a list of recommendations Ojeda forwarded to Blankenship and other Massey higher-ups. He highlighted the need for more training, more staff, compliance, and communication, among other things. Ross wrote in an email to Ojeda that he was thrilled about a new Massey and that he hoped and prayed these new and better things were going to happen. The jury again hearing a taped conversation in which Blankenship expressed his belief that the Ross memo would be detrimental to Massey during litigation if a miner died.
For example, if that was a fatal today, or if we have one, it'd be a terrible document to be discovered.
In an emotional moment, Ross choked up, wiped away tears, and told the jury, quote, "I thought good things were going to happen. I thought they would take serious steps to change, so I was happy about this. It would be better all around for the miners and the company. They wouldn't have to fight with MSHA or blame them."
We begin with breaking news today in the trial of former Massey Energy CEO Don Blankenship. The government and defense both rest their cases, with the defense not calling any witnesses. Eyewitness News reporter Leslie Rubin joins us now live. Leslie, what happened today?
Jennifer, it certainly was a stunning turn of events here in the trial of former Massey CEO Don Blankenship. Now, we did expect the government to rest its case this morning, but no one saw it coming when the defense turned around and said it rested its case as well. Now, after 24 days of testimony and 27 witnesses, the case against Don Blankenship will likely be in the hands of the jury by tomorrow. Both sides spent the morning out of the presence of the jury, arguing about tapes the defense wanted to admit as evidence evidence. The judge had indicated at least portions or some of those tapes were admissible, but they weren't going to be allowed to be introduced as evidence through the government's witness. That was FBI Special Agent James Lafferty. He was the government's final witness. Now, there was a short recess for both sides to gather their thoughts and see how they were going to proceed. Assistant U.S. Attorney Steve Rubin said the government rested just after 10 o'clock this morning. There was a short bench conference, and then in that shocking turn of events, the defense said it rested as well. Family members of fallen UBB minors say they are blown away by this defense strategy. Judy Jones Peterson, who lost her brother, was asked if she had given any thought to what she would do if Blankenship walked away from this courthouse a free man.
I would say that if that happens, there is no justice to be had in this land. I would say that if that happens, that there is a separation of justice in this land where people who have money and who can buy high-powered lawyers from Washington, D.C., and can get off them. Justice doesn't exist for, people such as myself.
Both sides are coming back at 1:30 this afternoon to go over jury instructions. We expect closing arguments tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock when the jury returns. The judge will then issue jury instructions, and that case that could send former Massey CEO Don Blankenship to prison for 30 years will be in the hands of the jury. For now, though, reporting live in Charleston, Leslie Rubin, Eyewitness News.
Tonight at 6, the case against former Massey Energy CEO Don Blankenship now in the hands of the jury.
Eyewitness News reporter Bob Aaron has been in the courtroom all day. He joins us now live from the federal courthouse in Charleston. Good evening, Bob.
Good evening, Rick. Jurors left here about an hour ago and will resume their deliberations at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. They just about had enough time to pick a foreman and get the numerous amounts of evidence.
Tonight at 6, still no verdict in the Don Blankenship trial, and today the jury telling the judge they couldn't come to an agreement.
Eyewitness News reporter Leslie Rubin has been on jury watch all day today. She joins us now live at the federal courthouse with the latest. Leslie.
Rick, the jurors sent Judge Irene Berger that note just before lunch this morning, and the note said that they could not come to an agreement and they wanted to know how long they should deliberate. The judge said, it's too early in this trial. They had only been deliberating for about 8 hours at the time to declare a mistrial.
Family of UBB miners killed in that explosion are now eager to know what they've been up to since they got the case. Eyewitness News reporter Leslie Rubin has been following this lengthy and complicated trial that also has some lawyers weighing in on what might be going on in the minds of the jury. Leslie.
Rick, outside Judge Irene Berger's courtroom on the 5th floor of the federal courthouse, you can find UBB family members, reporters, and local lawyers waiting for any movement from the jury. Everyone with their own analysis of what the hours and hours of deliberations means for Blankenship's fate.
We want justice. We don't care how long it takes.
For Shirley Witt and her sister Sherry Keeney DuPoy, 5 full days of deliberations is nothing compared to the 5 years they've spent wondering if Don Blankenship would ever go to trial.
I don't think it's unrealistic to think after what these jurors were put through for the last 5.5 weeks to think that 5 days is unrealistic time for them to come back with a verdict. If it takes 20 days, we will be here.
They came to every day of the trial for one reason. Their brother, Boone Payne, who died along with 28 of his fellow miners at Upper Big Branch. And they are eagerly waiting for the moment the jury decides the former Massey CEO's guilt or innocence on 3 charges.
I want to be here and see his face. I don't want to see it on TV later from you guys. I want to see his face when he's found guilty.
But lawyers paying close attention to the historic trial say that with each passing day, the defense is feeling more confident about their case and their stunning decision to not call a single witness.
I think the defense has to be heartened by the fact that there's not a conviction at this point. I think it's also interesting that the judge hasn't even discussed when, if at all, she may give the jury a charge, a specific instruction on how to move forward from this deadlock.
Blankenship renewed his motion for a mistrial Tuesday, saying it was clear the jury couldn't reach a decision, but the judge disagreed, saying their lack of communication since last Friday was indicative of productivity.
It sounds to me as if the jury could come back Monday after Thanksgiving, could deliberate all day, and if they don't send out a note, if they don't send out any questions like they have not the last 2 days, nothing else may happen.
Family hoping the jury realizes the significance of the case before them, but understanding they need time.
We're talking about a man's life here. You know, you got to take it serious. 30 years is a long time when you're 65 years old. So they want to get it right.
Breaking news for you now. Verdict in the Don Blankenship trial.
That's right. Let's go straight to Eyewitness News reporter Bob Aaron at the federal building. Bob, what do we have?
We have something that we didn't think we would see. A boss of a major mining company convicted. He has been convicted on the conspiracy charge to violate the mine safety laws. That is the first charge. Found not guilty on the other two charges relating to statements and filings over federal financial laws. Leslie Rubin in the courtroom and will bring us more information here in moments. But a jury has convicted Don Blankenship on one of the three charges that he faced.
All right, welcome back to Eyewitness News. Continuing coverage now of the verdict in Don Blankenship's trial.
Let's get straight to Eyewitness News reporter Leslie Rubin, who joins us now live from outside of the federal building. Leslie.
Bill Taylor and Don Blankenship right now are addressing the media. As you can see right there, that was Bill Taylor. He is the lead attorney for Don Blankenship. They had just left the courtroom and they were addressing the media and they were basically saying that they were ready to move on. Mr. Taylor, we're on live right now. Can you just give us a brief rundown of what you just said? You just said that you were, I'd say, at least somewhat pleased at the verdict.
Well, no, we're disappointed in the verdict. We wanted an outright acquittal.
But the fact that it was
the fact that the jury found us not guilty of all the felonies and guilty only of a misdemeanor is some consolation. We think the jury was mistaken, and I don't think that the jury would have reached that verdict if it hadn't been held out so long.
Do you think that your client will be spending time in prison for this?
No, I do not.
Why do you believe that?
Because I don't think the Court of Appeals, any Court of Appeals in the country will affirm this conviction.
Do you still think
Thanks.
this is politically driven?
That was Bill Taylor, lead attorney for Don Blankenship. Mr. Blankenship, we're on live right now. Is there any comment that you would like to make, sir?
No, ma'am.
Throughout this whole thing, you have seemed pretty confident. Coming out today, you do stand convicted of a misdemeanor. How are you feeling right now?
I feel fine.
If we come over here, this is Judy Peterson Jones. She has been here the entire trial. We're going to listen into what she has to say right now.
Mr. Blankenship, I say you now wear a cloak of criminal shame. Even though Mr. Blankenship may not be convicted of all of these crimes, he is guilty, my friends, and he is not guilty of just being a liar, cheat, and fraud. He is guilty of the reckless disregard of human life. Do you hear me what I'm saying? The reckless disregard of human life and the loss of 29 souls through that reckless disregard and negligent homicide.
Judy, we appreciate your time. We're actually on live right now, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Judy, we have been extremely close throughout this trial and talking to you nearly every day. You have been one of the family members that has been here every single day. You all were holding each other, clutching each other. You were crying as you knew that this verdict was coming down. Do you have any sense of relief right now?
Well, as I say, I just want people to understand what just hearing the word guilty. I mean, to me, it didn't matter what they charged him to be guilty of. I just wanted to hear the words, "You are guilty, my friend." This case sets a precedent. You're on notice. You're on notice, my friends. You're on notice.
Judy, we thank you so much for your time. You've been a remarkable voice throughout this entire process.
Well, thank you guys so much. I'm telling you, you guys are the warriors, right? You know, the press, so...
That was Judy Dean Jones. She lost her brother, Edward Dean Jones, in the explosion, and she has been here every single day throughout this trial that has gone on now for more than 2 months. I want to take you into the courtroom, though. When that verdict came down, the courtroom was the most people that have been in there since this began, and the family sat in the front row, and they clutched each other as they realized that this was the moment that they had been waiting for, the moment they would find out Don Blankenship's guilt or innocence.
Eyewitness News starts right now.
Do you think that your client will be spending time in prison for this?
No, I do not.
How are you feeling right now?
I feel fine.
And so just to hear the words, "You are guilty," was vindication enough for me.
The trial of the century is over. After months of testimony and deliberations, the verdict in the Don Blankenship trial is finally in. We have a reaction and a breakdown of his punishment. We have it all for you covered straight ahead. Good evening, I'm Stefano DiPietro-Antonio.
And I'm Callie Cart. This is Eyewitness News. A verdict reached in that landmark case. Don Blankenship found guilty of conspiring to willfully violate mandatory federal mine safety standards. It is a misdemeanor. He faces up to a year in prison. He was acquitted of 2 felony charges, false statements to the SEC and stock fraud. Blankenship remains a free man tonight, but will be sentenced next year. We do have team coverage tonight of the verdict. Let's head straight out to Eyewitness News reporter Leslie Rubin live at the federal courthouse. Leslie.
Callie, after a 5-year-long investigation and a trial that lasted more than 2 months, it all came down to the 2 minutes it took for Judge Irene Berger to read that verdict to a packed courtroom today. Family members of those UBB fallen miners sat nervously crying, clutching onto each other as they heard the words guilty of conspiracy, followed then quickly by 2 not guilty verdicts on the charges that carried more weight. No matter how you feel about the polarizing figure that is Don Blankenship, it was a historic day in West Virginia. Throughout this whole thing, you have seemed pretty confident. Coming out today, you do stand convicted of a misdemeanor. How are you feeling right now?
I feel fine.
The former king of coal turned convicted criminal, Don Blankenship, showing no emotion as he learned a jury found him guilty of conspiring to violate mine safety laws, facing up to a year in prison. But on the felony charges that could have locked him up for 25 years, the jury says he's innocent.
We're disappointed, but not as disappointed as we could have been. The case should never have been brought. There was never enough evidence to justify convicting Mr. Blankenship of any of these offenses.
It took the jury 10 days to come to the decision, announcing twice they were deadlocked, prompting the controversial Allen charge to be read 2 days ago. The special set of instructions, sometimes called a dynamite charge, because of its ability to blast the decision from a deadlocked jury. This is just one of the many reasons the defense says it will appeal.
This is a record which will be very full of errors on appeal. I'm as confident as I've ever been that the Court of Appeals will reverse the conviction.
A conviction family members say they waited 5 years for, even though Blankenship was never charged with causing the explosion that killed their loved ones.
He is guilty, my friends, and he is not guilty of just being a liar, cheat, and fraud. He is guilty of the reckless disregard of human life. Do you hear me what I'm saying? The reckless disregard of human life and the loss of 29 souls through that reckless disregard and negligent homicide.
Blankenship was allowed to remain free on a $5 million bond. The government had asked that he be jailed or at least put on home confinement because they considered him a flight risk. He will be back here in March for sentencing. For now, reporting live in Charleston, Leslie Rubin, Eyewitness News.
All right, thank you, Leslie. Good work out there. We continue our team coverage now. There was a lot of excitement outside the courthouse the second that verdict was announced today.
No doubt, a flurry of activity there. Eyewitness News reporter Bob Aaron is also live there at the federal courthouse. What's going on, Bob?
Well, prosecutors say this is a precedent-setting case, a game changer for corporate America. Now, it's only a misdemeanor conviction, and it can't mean more than a year in jail, but they say this case is all about accountability after a very long-running investigation.
The jury found former Massey Energy Chief Executive Officer Don Blankenship guilty of conspiring to willfully violate mine safety standards, but cleared him of other charges. Jurors never heard anyone say Blankenship ordered violations of safety standards or illegally warned workers of inspections, but testimony showed he put profits ahead of miner safety. The violations involved the Upper Big Branch mine. 5 years ago, 29 workers died there in an underground explosion.
He now faces the prospect of federal prison time for running roughshod over those laws. To go from boardroom to the prospect of incarceration sends a powerful message to executives.
Goodwin called it a landmark day for the safety of coal miners.
Critical part of doing justice, particularly in a case like this, is accountability. It is, as the U.S. Attorney said, unprecedented as far as we know.
Blankenship will appeal the conviction that came after 24 days of testimony. Jury deliberations began November 17th, and it appeared deadlocked. It was a long, emotional wait for the families of the victims of the UBB explosion. But for some, the word guilty was enough.
And just the word guilty, it's enough. It's enough to send the message.
I would like to see him go to jail. I mean, I don't care if it's 60 days or a year. I think Don Blankenship needs to go to jail. He needs to think about what kind of life he's lived and what he's done to 29 families.
Blankenship faces a maximum of 1 year behind bars. He remains free on bond. Prosecutors managed to convince a jury that safety violations were almost part of Massey's business plan. Blankenship will be sentenced on March 23rd of next year. Reporting live from the federal courthouse in Charleston, I'm Bob Aaron for Eyewitness News.
Bob, thanks. Great work from you and Leslie all throughout the trial.
Back into the room.